Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare. So this will be my third video that tackles Rick and Morty's fourth season, and it's been a weird journey. My first video covered how the first half of this year felt like the worst Rick and Morty has ever been. I was impressed with the episode it came back with though, and now I'm here to say that, in my opinion at least, the back half of season 4 was the strongest the show has been since season 2. It staged a mid-season comeback that you don't see much in TV, especially in this age of shorter seasons. And while the first half makes me unable to put this one on the same level as the first 2 years when taken as a whole, this week I want to focus on that second half and the big course corrections that I think it made to keep the show going at the top of its game. I've already talked about how much I enjoyed the very weird and meta train episode, but the week after that was Primordius, which I wouldn't put up there with the very best the show has to offer, but it was definitely a solid episode. Unlike some of the earlier episodes this year, I think it actually really explored its sci-fi premise well. I loved the concept of this facehugger species that doesn't just become monsters. In fact, they used their hosts to build a pretty normal, advanced society. That added some moral depth to them that they didn't appear to have at first. And that ending with Summer, Rick, and Morty really having to sit with what they had done was pretty great. I think the show does well when it walks that very fine line of being goofy and fourth wall breaking about its premises, while also taking the consequences they create and the effect that has on our characters actually kind of seriously. It wasn't a perfect episode, I think it was probably a bit longer than its fairly simple premise could support, but it was exactly the kind of story the show excels at, and I think a lot of the facehugger jokes worked really well. But it kind of pales in comparison to the next one, which has the extremely straightforward title, the Vat of Acid episode. After watching this one through a couple times, I'm perfectly happy just saying it. This is top tier Rick and Morty. Probably in the top 5 episodes they've ever made. It's funny, it's got a great sci-fi hook, and most exciting of all for this season, I think it really reflects where all the characters are at this specific moment. You couldn't just slot the Vat of Acid episode into season 1 or 2. I don't think it would work. The Morty we get here is far more confident, and isn't nervous at all about telling Rick that his ideas suck, in a way that he never would have been able to early on. One of the most fun aspects of this show is seeing just how far they'll take their premises. And I think the idea of a device that saves your spot in real life, just like in a video game, was used pretty expertly here. I loved Morty meeting the love of his life and surviving this horrific plane crash with their relationship intact, only for it to all disappear when Jerry uses the wrong remote. Rick and Morty is really good at creating these small, surprisingly emotional moments and then just torching them. And the actual acid vats were pretty amazing too. This fake acid that you hide in with compartments for bones to just float to the surface. It's so stupid and low tech, but you can tell Rick just loves the idea and is genuinely hurt when Morty doesn't like it too. I also loved that Rick took a couple swipes at that awful dragon episode. It made me think that the writers know that was one of their weaker scripts. Oh, and the reveal that Morty has been killing a version of himself every single time he uses the button is the kind of disturbing sci-fi that the show nails, without even really having to linger on it. And as far as laughs go, your mileage may vary, but for me, this was the most funny the show was this year. The episode after, Childrick of Mort, isn't quite at the same level, but it's not a huge drop in quality either. It also sets the stage well for Beth's arc in the finale. The premise is really simple. Rick slept with a living planet who now wants help raising what we assume to be their kids. What the episode really becomes about, though, is Beth and Rick working together to build this entire civilization. Meanwhile, Jerry wanders off after being humiliated by Summer and ends up becoming the leader of all the rock kids that Rick has determined they don't need. Pretty soon a Zeus-like god is involved, and you have a solid episode. It's rare that a Jerry subplot is my favorite part of any given episode, but I really liked it here. For one thing, I think he's actually kind of the more sympathetic one in the battle at the end. His rockmen have been completely tossed aside and dumped out of society by Rick and Beth, which is actually pretty messed up if you think about it for more than like 5 seconds. The Zeus fight is also pretty fun, especially how it's resolved by Morty and Summer flying a spaceship into his head. Rick's anger at the end that Morty thought the ship would just control like a video game controller was probably the biggest laugh of the episode for me, but really, this one was just setting the stage for the focus on Beth in the season finale.
Rick and Morty action figures, licensed character, merchandise adventure.
Holy crap, Morty, run! We're gonna die!
We finally get to see what happened to the original Beth, or possibly clone Beth, when she makes a return here, along with Tammy and Bird Person, now reborn as Phoenix Person. And honestly, I'm a little more torn on this finale than I am with the rest of the back half of the season. While I do think Beth's arc and the family's rejection of Rick at the end worked really well, a lot of the actual story and even some of the jokes felt pretty played out. And I feel like even within the episode, they were trying pretty hard to lampshade that, with Rick groaning over how Star Wars the whole setup was, and Morty and Summer constantly complimenting their own very basic character arcs. I think the lack of meaningful Morty scenes also kind of hurt this one. I mean, this was 2 episodes in a row that he was kind of sidelined in the C-plot along with Summer. So even though it's the finale, it didn't feel quite as meaningful to our 2 title characters as something like the Vat of Acid episode did. Still, I don't think it's a bad one either. The return of Bird Person was more funny than I'd expected, and the Beth stuff did work great. I especially loved the end scene where Rick actually watches what he did, and is unable to run from the fact that, yeah, he's been a pretty terrible father this whole time, and his family shunning him is probably justified. It doesn't feel as huge as some of the past finales, and I think a big part of that could be the show knowing that it still has 60 episodes it needs to produce. But as a standalone, I think it works. Overall, Rick and Morty Season 4 started out on extremely shaky ground, feeling like a show that might be aging past its relevancy, but managed to regroup in this back half with some shockingly good episodes. I was really worried about the state of the show during like December of last year. But something feels like it changed in the writer's room, or maybe the extra time just helped bring these episodes more in line with the quality of seasons 1 and 2. I don't know when we'll see the show again, hopefully sooner than like 2022 or something, but when it does return, I'll be much more excited to get back into it than I was when it came back from its half-season break. It went from a great but fading show to reclaiming its spot as a top-tier TV comedy. It's kind of hard to believe that Rick and Morty started in 2013. Those 4 seasons have taken a while, and a lot has changed in that time, especially online. And if you're anything like me and want to try to hack it by making a living on the internet, you have to keep up with a weird and shifting online landscape. For that, I highly recommend going freelance, building and branding your own success. This is a really popular class on Skillshare right now, and for good reason, as it effectively breaks down what you need to know when trying to get into YouTube or even pitching traditional media outlets. You can check it out on Skillshare, and the first 1,000 people to click on the link in the pinned comment below will get 2 months of classes on pretty much any subject from photography to art to business, and way more, absolutely free. Plus, an annual subscription is less than $10. So get started today and go to skl.sh/captainmidnight33. That's skl.sh/captainmidnight33.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.